Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies, inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Warning shots are bullshit.
Welcome to Wake Up Heavy, my weird dad's weird podcast about weird movies. In this episode, my weird dad will be talking about
Phantasm.
Hello and welcome to the Wake Up Heavy podcast. This is Mark, your horror host, and today is Season 1, Episode 1 on Don Coscarelli's 1979 horror classic, Phantasm.
Phantasm. Is it a nightmare? Phantasm. Is it an illusion? Phantasm. Is it an evil?
You have to take me home. But why? No questions. You must take me home.
Phantasm. Is it a fantasy? Phantasm. Is it alive?
There was nobody driving.
Whatever it is. If this one doesn't scare you, you're already dead. Phantasm.
Now, because the nature of the plot is a little bit jumpy and can be convoluted, and it's not easy to relay succinctly, I'm going to read the back of the VHS box. And I'll do this for other movies because I just think it's kind of fun to see what they wrote to try and get you to rent it. But this works pretty well as a synopsis of the film. So here we go. Where the dead are no longer that way. When two brothers uncover the startling secret of the living dead following the murder of their friend, what seems like a horrible unending nightmare becomes terrifying reality. A mortuary's embalming cellar is the site for supernatural evil, including a floating sphere with razor-sharp protruding daggers, which seeks out victims and drains the blood from their heads. As the brothers learn more and more about what is really going on at Morningside Mortuary, they get deeper into trouble. until it may be too late to escape. And then the particulars of the film: 1979, color, 88 minutes, rated R, horror. And a nice little quote on the front: a unique and fascinating horror hit. Michael Weldon, The Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film, which is a book I will reference numerous times in this podcast. And I have it just to the left of me right now, actually. And I'll read some of the reviews from that on the movies when I can. This has a positive review in Psychotronic. 2 or 3 of the other films that I plan on doing, I've kind of read through. And they're not very positive, but, that's the beauty of movies. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and I happen to treasure Phantasm deeply. Okay, I've got my coffee, and it looks like I'm ready to go. I want to take just a couple minutes here at the beginning to explain how most of these podcasts are going to go, which I probably should have done in the introductory episode, but it wasn't one of the questions that my daughter asked. So my angle on these, on most of them, is going to be my history with the movie. And that's kind of why I get hung up on, when did I see it? How old was I? What was my frame of reference? And that's probably even more particular to this movie, to Phantasm, because I'll get to that in a second here, but that's sort of why, for one thing, this is called Recollections of Horror, and why I started it in the first place was, when I think about these movies, I really want to talk about, first time seeing them, how many times I watched them, were they easy to get a hold of, that kind of stuff. So that's where we'll start with this. And then I'll go in and generally talk about favorite scenes and throw in some clips from the movies. And then also kind of bring it back around to present day. And does the movie still hold up? Am I still watching it? Do I still enjoy it? I think, well, for the most part, if I'm talking about the movie, it's a recommendation. I'm not going to do movies that I don't care for. I don't see any point in doing that. Maybe down the road, there are suggestions from listeners, and it's something that I've never seen, and kind of feel like broaching either an old movie or a new movie in that way and do an episode, then, maybe it is something that I don't care for. For Phantasm, I can tell you right now, it's a recommendation from me. It is a movie that has kind of rested in the back of my mind for about 35 years. I'll go ahead and get started on the history part of this. We'll move into scenes, characters, all that good stuff. So I first saw Phantasm when I was, now I haven't nailed it down exactly, and this will be common, but I was 13 or 14. I know this, for one thing, because that is when I was watching horror movies like a crazy person. I mean, that's just about all we rented. We'd watch them at a friend's house mostly. I remember watching The Thing over and over again at their house. They lived really close to the video store that we used to go to, so it was just a couple minute drive down the street. Pick up some movies, come back, sit down and watch them. And I had kind of gotten over my sort of fear of watching horror movies, and it wasn't due to being scared. This had something to do with my weak stomach that I had acquired in elementary school, and that's a story for another time. But I did mention it in the introductory episode that I had originally done, and it's not in the one that's up on the blog. Phantasm was, I think, a movie that I saw the ads for, years before we ever rented it, because it came out in 1979. I was 10, wasn't going to see, my parents were not the type to take kids to, see rated R movies, especially horror movies. Even though I do think we saw Jaws at the drive-in on a double bill. It was replayed a couple years after it had originally played. It was PG, and I always thought it was R, but It's a PG movie, and we saw that with Orca, and I wasn't, terribly scared by that, and my parents didn't seem to have a problem with that. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. Phantasm is not something that I would have seen in the theater, and this was right on the cusp of the VHS glory days. In 79, 80, 81, it was still very rare for people to have them in their homes, and we didn't have one, I think, until maybe 1984 or 85. So the first time I saw Phantasm was probably at somebody else's house. It is a movie that resonated with me immediately. It's a movie that I rented very often. It's a movie that stuck with me throughout the years. And throughout the years, it wasn't always available to me. I think the last time I probably watched it as a teenager was probably in the late 80s. I may have seen it because of the sequel. The sequel came out about 9 years after the original, and I do remember seeing it back then, and I'll bring this up later because it caused great confusion to me with the switching of the lead actor. I may have watched it again around then. We moved in 1991, I think, from my childhood home, and that was where the video store, you went to a local video store. When we moved, those days were over. So I probably didn't see it from like 1991 until 2 or 3 years ago. 2 years ago, I think, when it finally got re-released, remastered. Thank you, J.J. Abrams. By the way, let me get that out of the way up front here. Thanks for getting it redone and for moving the final sequel along to get finished, and all the Phantasm fans out there appreciate that. Yeah, there was a pretty decent stretch of at least 25, 26 years where I didn't see the movie, but it was something that I always thought about. I could remember, exact scenes from the movie. The main reason for that is, and kind of the main point of my discussion here today, is that feeling that Phantasm generates. And that feeling is that dreamlike and surreal quality that it has. And so I want to stop real quick and throw in a little definition of surreal here. So surreal is having the disorienting, hallucinatory quality of a dream. Unreal, fantastic. And that really, for me, is a big part of why I like Phantasm so much and why it struck a nerve with me then, because I didn't have that definition. I didn't have that understanding of surrealism when I was 13 or 14, other than, knowing of Salvador Dali and things like persistence of memory. Years later, I would study kind of on my own surrealism and the painters and filmmakers of that movement. Not having that kind of grounding in that terminology, I just took the feeling that the movie gave me, and it always played out like oddly dreamlike. It's also got a very childlike quality, which is another reason why I like it, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that tone and that feel that kind of threw me off is what I really, really tend to gravitate toward in movies, and especially back then. And I still love surrealism. David Lynch is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers. Just strange movies. Something like Extra, which I've mentioned on one podcast or another. I've done so many run-throughs of these, I get confused. It's on something that's either I've put up or will put up, but it is just a weird fucking movie, and a lot of the imagery in that film could be deemed surreal. I think horror kind of lends itself to that dark surrealism because it shows things that aren't quite right. It's nightmare stuff. And of course, there are nightmares in Phantasm. A lot of people really just see the whole movie as a nightmare. I think one of the things I read recently, and I had never really heard this before, I haven't dived, I think is the correct word. I haven't dived real deeply into Phantasm lore. There is a lot out there because of the editing of the movie, which is another thing I will get into. I read somewhere that the movie, either the initial script, or even when they shot it, there was kind of a whole first half of the movie that we didn't see. And now I've heard about a lot of the deleted scenes, and a lot of them have ended up in Phantasm 4. Some of the other ones are in, like the Blu-ray remaster extra stuff. Apparently, it was really kind of more like a Something Wicked This Way Comes, where Mike is seeing all this stuff going on in town, and it kind of culminates when he goes to the cemetery during Tommy's funeral at the beginning of the movie. So there's supposedly a whole bunch of stuff prior to that makes it play even more kind of nightmarish. And I don't know if that's the case or not. It's just one thing I read, I think, on a fan blog, PHAN, because get it, they're fans of Phantasm. So I haven't validated that in any way, but maybe search that out, and it seems to me to make sense, because I know that Something Wicked This Way Comes was an inspiration to Don Coscarelli for the movie. Okay, so let's stop for a minute and talk about the movie proper. I read the VHS cover early on here, and so again, I'm not going to do a synopsis really, but basically what we have here is two brothers, Mike and Jody, who I always confuse and will probably say the wrong name at some point in this podcast. I just feel like the guy who plays Mike looks more like a Jody, and his name is really Mike. So, I don't know how to explain that, but he looks like a Jody. The other guy looks like a Mike, but it's not that way. So our protagonist, Mike, is a 13-year-old boy. His brother, Jody, is, I would say, supposed to be in his early to mid 20s. And then their pal, Reggie, who I think is supposed to be, a little bit older. He's in his 30s. And I think he really was when the movie was made. But, he's got his own business, and he's out there slinging ice cream and bald, I should say, and with a ponytail. The crux of the story is that Mike and Jody's parents are recently deceased. They are entombed at the Morningside mortuary. Mike starts to see strange things there and gets a really weird feeling from the mortician at the cemetery, who we all now know as the Tall Man, played by Angus Scrimm. Mike is played by A. Michael Baldwin, Jody is played by Bill Thornberry.
It's time for another tangent.
Bill Thornberry was born in Kingsburg, California, which is about 25 miles southwest of Fresno, my hometown, and from where I am creating this podcast. And he also graduated from the California State University of Fresno, which is also my alma mater. So I have a teeny tiny connection to the world of Phantasm. And then Reggie Bannister plays Reggie. I don't know why Jody isn't called Bill. It probably would have made it a lot easier for me to remember who is who. And then one last tangent here. That confusion with the names is what really confused me about Phantasm 2. When I saw Phantasm 2, I very well may not have seen Phantasm for a few years. Even when I had as a kid, I know that I got their names confused. So I had no idea which brother James LaGrosse was supposed to be. Because obviously he's Mike. He's supposed to be the Mike character, Michael Baldwin's character. And so he's called Mike in the movie. But I always thought that the older brother was called Mike, so that's who I thought he was supposed to be. And so it just really messed up kind of viewing that sequel the first time, I think. And, maybe the first couple of times later that I saw it. It was more widely available than any of the others because it had been put out by, Universal or United had done the sequel. And I may bring the sequels up a little bit towards the end here. So it was, since that was a major company, the distribution was much better for that. And I think it was in most video stores at the time, and probably why I watched it and not the original again. Getting away from the confusion there. It's basically these three guys up against the tall man and his horde of minions, which includes robed dwarves who looked suspiciously like Jawas, and I must point out that is one of the reasons why I liked the movie, because I had a mild obsession with Jawas when I was a kid. My favorite thing from Star Wars, no question. Tried to go as a Jawa for Halloween one year, and I think we didn't quite make it, and I went as a monk instead. I don't know. My mom couldn't figure out how to make the hood, apparently. I'm not really sure what happened. Along with the robed dwarves, we have the lady in lavender, who may or may not be the tall man. I'll get into that as well. It's kind of a confusing point for me. The mindless caretaker, who doesn't last too long in the movie. Who else is at his disposal? I know I'm leaving somebody out. Oh, yeah, of course, the sphere. And he also has at his disposal his finger. And that's one of the scenes I'll talk about in a little bit. So coming back around to that notion of surrealism and the dreamlike quality of Phantasm, this is what really sets this movie apart for me. Along with the dreamlike quality, there's a childlike quality to the movie. It plays out, and I've seen it described as the story that a 13-year-old boy would tell. Well, if you're a 13-year-old boy, when you see it, it is probably a little more likely to strike a chord. It's going to resonate. And that's exactly where I came from with this movie. I was 13 or 14. I saw it as something that I would have written myself, and it just had that quirkiness that I really didn't even know that I loved so deeply. And even Angus Scrimm at some point said that this is a movie for teenage boys between the ages of 10 to 13. That's the audience. That's who picked up on it. There are other movies that I know that, other people have this kind of experience with. One in particular that I don't really care for is Monster Squad. And that is a movie that I never saw. I think I had, by that time, if I'm not mistaken, that's like from 85, 86. I was still watching horror movies pretty heavily. I don't know why I never saw it. Probably because it was marketed as, and is, a horror comedy. And even back then, that was not my favorite genre or subgenre. I finally watched it a couple years ago, and it really didn't work for me. And I know a lot of people love it. And I know a lot of people who saw it when they were the same age as those kids. It stuck with them the way Phantasm stuck with me. Now, on the other hand, another movie, and again, I don't know why I never saw this, because this would have worked for me as a kid, was The Gate. I can't explain it. I don't know why I passed it by. I was probably still just renting the same things over and over again. I kind of stuck with what I liked. I saw The Gate a couple years ago and loved it. I think it's a great kid horror movie. It made me think of The Evil Dead. This is The Evil Dead kid version. It's a little bit darker, a little bit scarier than Monster Squad, so that's part of it too. I think I would have loved it if I had seen it back when it first came out. it comes down to tone, and a lot of the humor and goofiness fell flat in Monster Squad for me. The Gate had that kind of overall dark tone, kids on their own. I mean, it's very, it has that similar kind of feel to Phantasm, which is probably why I like it. I love it when the parents are gone. And of course, in The Gate, they're just on vacation. They're not dead. Those kids' movies, Goonies, all that stuff, where it's just the kids on their own, and you relate to it and buy into it and go along with the story. I think that a lot of the success of Phantasm kind of lives in that world of when you saw it. And not that you can't enjoy it if you're older and see it for the first time. Not that you can't enjoy it if you're female, of any age. But I think if you saw it when you were a young teenager for the first time, it's going to have a lot more weight. So Phantasm is the movie that I wish my 13-year-old self would have written. And now I want to talk about some of the scenes that I really love. And the first scene happens pretty early in the movie. Mike I think he's gotten home after the strange happenings at the cemetery, where he sees the tall man lift up the coffin, where he gets glimpses of the dwarves. He also gets apparently knocked off his bike by the tall man telekinetically. And that's not shown at that scene, but it's relayed here in the scene that I want to play, which is when he goes to his friend's house to talk to her fortune teller grandmother. This is a great scene for a lot of reasons, but we have some of the influences on Don Coscarelli, and then we have kind of a real good sense of the confusing nature of the narrative itself. So I want to play that clip and then come back real quick and play a clip from a different movie and kind of discuss that real briefly.
Let's roll the footage.
Michael, grandmother wants to play a little game.
Wow, how'd you do that?
Put your hand in the box.
Well, what's in it?
Just put your hand in the black box.
Okay, but what's in it? Hey, this thing really hurts.
Don't fear, Michael.
I can't get my hand out.
Don't fear.
Give me back my hand.
Don't fear. It was simply reflection. Fear is the killer. That's what grandmother wants you to learn.
Boy, that really hurt.
And then this clip from a movie that came out 5 years after Phantasm.
Put your right hand in the box.
What's in the box?
Then stop. Put your hand in the box. You will feel an itching there. Now the itching becomes burning. Heat upon heat upon heat. Silence! Silence!
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. I must not
feel flesh.
mind killer crispy.
So Coscarelli beat everybody to the punch with Dune. He made it to theaters before Lynch. He beat out Jodorowsky, Ridley Scott. Even though it's only a couple minutes long, I'm going to give him credit for that. So Dune was another inspiration for Coscarelli, if only for that scene. Also, apparently the character of the fortune teller grandma who's blind is dressed in all black, has kind of a shawl in black on. This is another callback to Something Wicked This Way Comes, with a character that is called the Dust Witch. And, it's one of the bad guys. She's one of the bad guys in Something Wicked This Way Comes, and isn't that in this movie. But from what I have read, that is the inspiration for at least her look and maybe her abilities. And then there's another important thing that happens in this scene at the fortune tellers. Mike is relaying his fears about Jody leaving. Of course, as I mentioned, they've lost their parents. Mike's big fear, and this is the fear that kind of envelops the whole movie, informs the narrative and his mindset. Parents dying, Jody's going to leave me, what's going to happen to me? He has all that going on. He relays this information to, the fear to the fortune teller and his friend that's there. So we have a flashback of Mike and Jody driving in the now famous Cuda, and they pull up to their house, and a friend of Jody's has stopped by. He's there for Tommy's funeral, which is how we open the movie. Jody is relaying to his friend that, he wants to leave. He wants to get out of town, but he's not sure what to do about Mike. And at that point, Jody says, as it is, he follows me around all the time. So then we have a flashback to an instance of Mike following Jody, tailing behind him. And we see this multiple times in the movie. The reason I'm even bringing it up is that it's a flashback within a flashback. That is, to me, it kind of illustrates the confusing nature of the narrative and what gives it, on top of the intentional surrealism, it's what gives it the unintentional surrealism. And so I kind of want to dive into that. And that has to do with the script and the editing and just the basic structure of the film itself. So Coscarelli and the actors have admitted that they really went into this without a complete shooting script. Coscarelli had the basic ideas, and this is nothing new or, foreign to movies. This happens quite often, especially with independent films, either on purpose or just by matter of, we need to start filming. Stanley Kubrick was famous for rewriting the scripts while they were shooting. If you watch the documentary about the making of The Shining, that's very apparent in that movie. So they go into shooting Phantasm without a full script, with the basic beats probably figured out. Call up the actors when we're going to do this scene at this location, improv a bunch of it, shoot it, go on. The lack of script and the lack of editing points are kind of what give the movie that unintentional surrealism, that disjointed feel. And then on top of that, they do a test screening and it doesn't play well. I think what I read was that the movie was sometime over 2 hours long. I don't have any problem with long movies. I've sat through 3-hour movies without an issue. I don't know that would have worked very well for something like Phantasm. So you get all those deleted scenes. Just by the nature of deleting scenes, there's almost always some kind of relevant information that's lost. That's when you get jumpiness in films. You kind of get plot holes. You get some added confusion. There may be things like wardrobe changes that go unexplained, location changes all of a sudden. There is an instance of that in Phantasm that I'd be curious to know if it was intentional or not. And I'll come back to that in a minute. All of that, the structure and the narrative, leads even more into that dreamlike feeling. And a lot of those scenes, like I already mentioned, end up in Phantasm 4, or they're on the disc as extras. And a lot of it is unnecessary. It's, the guys having a food fight at Reggie's ice cream parlor and another little performance by him. Jody at the bank with his girlfriend, stuff like that really doesn't inform the rest of the movie. It's just stuff they shot, and probably for the best that it was omitted. We do have a couple, though, of tall man death scenes, and one ends up in Phantasm 4, and that's where they hang him and intend to leave him. I think that at this point they figured out they can't really kill him, so they intend to leave him hanging from this tree forever. it's a little bit ridiculous. Again, this kind of goes to the idea that this was written by a 13-year-old. It wasn't written by a 13-year-old, but that's the feeling you get when Jody says something to the effect that the rope will last forever. That's just not how it works. I mean, ropes and strings and stuff have a limited lifespan. Plus, I think the tall man would be able to work his way out of that at some point. And then you have another death scene, which I kind of wish had been in the movie because it's pretty cool, where Mike realizes the tall man doesn't like the cold. I've just discovered a convenient fire extinguisher behind me here in the mortuary. I'm going to blast him with it, and he blows up. And it's a pretty awesome little special effects scene that, I don't know, could have been squeezed in there somewhere. Now, back to something I mentioned a little just earlier about jumping locations. Mike finally has proof that something otherworldly is happening. He and Jody are on the porch. Mike shows him the finger that he has absconded with, that he chopped off of the tall man's hands. They're sitting out on the porch, and then all of a sudden they're inside in the kitchen, and they're still having the same discussion. So I get the feeling that there was maybe some additional dialogue in there that was deemed unnecessary, even them maybe walking through the house. But it's just kind of a funny little cut, and we're still talking about the same thing. That, to me, is a really good example of representing a dream on film. It's not super noticeable. It's not jarring, but this is what happens in dreams. You change locations all of a sudden. I know that in my dreams, I oftentimes start out in the house where I grew up and haven't lived in for almost 30 years. Oh, no. Yeah, getting close to 30 years now. You'll walk through a door, and then you're in an apartment you lived in 15 years ago or something, or you're outside, or you're in a totally foreign location. So that's the kind of little stuff that really lends that whole dreamlike tone to the movie. And Mike and Jody both have dreams in the movie at different times. Mike is shown sleeping a number of times in the movie, and this is kind of important later on. But they both have dreams where they're pulled or grabbed by the quote-unquote Never Dead, which was an alternate title to the film. They're not the dwarves. They're not any of the other characters we're seeing. They're just kind of like zombie characters. I always kind of took it as it being their parents, because Mike's dream takes place. We pull back and we see he's in the graveyard and the tall man is standing over him. Jody's dream, he's sitting in a chair, and then all of a sudden he's in the mortuary itself and gets pulled through one of the tombs there. That's my interpretation of that. It has to do with their parents. I could be totally wrong.
Fucking foot, man. Oh, damn, look, I know you're not going to believe this, but these things were here, right in the garage, and they were going to get me.
Oh, give me a break, would you?
They were jumping on the car and making these weird sounds.
Sure wasn't that retarded kid Timmy up the street?
Oh, it was the same thing that chased me last night. Well, what are we going to do?
I just wanted to insert that so that we could get back on track here and talk about more of the story. That's a little example of something that I kind of didn't pay attention to as a kid. I notice it much more now as an adult. The questionable acting in the movie, I think, is something that can also kind of turn people away from the movie. That, and I keep talking about the dreamlike quality and the confusing nature. Again, if you're not kind of in tune with that quirky, oddball sensibility, the movie is really going to seem like a mess. I know, it's not a movie that you love or hate. I think it's not even a movie that you get or don't get, like people say that about David Lynch. I think it's more a matter of you either buy it or you don't. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and still do. I I laugh a little bit at the goofiness and maybe a little bit at the kind of beautiful song.
Let's roll the footage.
I'm working on it. I'm just sitting here at midnight, and I'll be sitting here till noon. You see, my lady left me lonely. Yes, she did. Baby left me blue. We're hot as love, you know.
I just needed to find a segue to be able to play that beautiful little Bill Thornberry original. But there is a key bit of information at the end of that with the tuning fork, which we will harken back to towards the end of the podcast. But yeah, that kind of, and I don't mind humor in horror movies. There is some good humor in Phantasm. The cheesiness slides a little bit higher on the scale with that and some of the other stuff, but I think the humor works pretty well in the movie. There's a fairly funny scene in the cemetery where Mike, has been tailing Jody, and Jody meets up with the lady in lavender at Dune's Cantina. And of course, they go off to the cemetery, which seems to be her favorite place to seduce the young men of the town. We get a nice little bit of comedy between Mike and Jody when he interrupts this.
What the heck? Wait here, it's my little brother. I think he's got some kind of a problem.
Now, neither of them know this at the time, but Mike's screaming through the cemetery has just basically saved Jody's life. The lady in lavender is one of those points that I think I might disagree with most other people. When we see her at the beginning of the movie seducing Tommy in the cemetery, there's a flash of the tall man's face inserted. It's become kind of commonplace to say that the tall man is basically a shapeshifter, and he takes on this form to get at the older people in town, or the older men, and kind of messes with kids in a different way. And I think a lot of that sort of relates to some of the deleted scenes, his more intentional kind of harvesting of people other than just taking dead bodies. But I never really saw it as him being a shapeshifter, and I think I have a good argument for that at the end of the movie when the tall man is chasing Mike. She is shown at a different point along the path that Mike is running. So it really would make no sense if he was shapeshifting into her, then she would just follow him from that point. I tend to see it as kind of a creation of his that he uses. Maybe not a real person, but I don't know what you want to call it. A entity that he kind of controls. So that's my take on the lady in lavender. So let's take a turn and talk about the other minions at the tall man's disposal. I've kind of mentioned the dwarves a couple of times. Their relation, in my mind, to Jawas, which apparently was unintentional, but I mean, come on. We've talked about Lady in Lavender, dwarves. We've got the caretaker, who has only a brief appearance in the movie. I'm pretty sure he's a zombie. He has dark around his eyes. He's kind of just at the bidding of the tall man. And this is when Mike has broken into the mortuary to find out what's going on. It's where we are also introduced to the sphere, which, has become ubiquitous, is what everyone remembers. They take on many different forms in the later movies. It's only shown, at least in the final cut of Phantasm, twice. So we get introduced to it. Mike encounters it in the hallways of the mortuary, manages to get away from the caretaker, and it lodges in his head, drills a hole, and squirts out gallons of blood. The caretaker dies and wets himself, which I never noticed until I saw the remastered version. I don't think I ever noticed that as a kid. And apparently it was kind of a problem for the censors. I don't know why. Maybe too real.
It's time for another tangent.
Real quick, I did want to add that I think that the sphere has some connection to Dune as well, with the Hunter-Seeker from Dune. And the sphere, I know that Coscarelli has said that it came from a dream, but I think that the Hunter-Seeker in Dune kind of informs the sphere. They act very similarly, so just wanted to throw that in. So he's dispatched shortly after he's introduced, and this is where Mike ends up with the tall man's finger. He gives chase. Mike slams the door on his hand and cuts his fingers off and takes one with him. And that's what he shows to Jody to prove that, hey, something is going on. This guy bleeds yellow blood. His finger, his disembodied finger, is still moving. And then at that point, we have kind of another example of, I don't want to say silliness. It's a little bit silly. The scene where the finger turns into the fly. And this is also kind of the point where the special effects kind of lose their oomph. It's a ridiculous little creature. They do a little bit of kind of slapstick acting where they've got it wrapped in a shirt and have to act like it's, pulling their arms up. And it's still kind of a fun little scene. It's something that I always enjoyed seeing as a kid. I can hearken back to that enjoyment when I see it now and kind of dismiss the silliness of it. But they finally dispatch of the fly in the garbage disposal. Reggie has come in at this point, so he's clued in to what's going on, and we get some of his best lines here.
Hi, guys. I decided I'd come over and see what was going on before the kids got out of summer school. Hey, Mike, you want to ride along with me today? Pretty warm outside, and the ice cream's going to be flying fast and furious. Remember how good you were at crowd control last time? Hey, what's going on here? What the hell is going on?
So once all three are kind of now embroiled in the story, we really pick up the pace here and things start to happen pretty quickly. Jody rearms Mike.
Here, you keep that. Now remember, you don't aim a gun at a man unless you intend to shoot him. And you don't shoot a man unless you intend to kill him. No warning shots. Hey, you listening to it?
Yeah.
No warning shots. Warning shots are bullshit. You shoot to kill, or you don't shoot at all.
Jody goes off to investigate the Morningside Cemetery himself, runs into a dwarf, shoots it in the head while narrowly missing his own, and kind of another one of those funny little scenes. Not a wise decision to shoot at an angle like that from above, really, really dangerously close to your own head. But he escapes and then gets chased by a hearse. Mike picks him up in the CUDA.
All right. Who's in there? Mike?
Mike. Door latch. Get in. Oh, here it comes.
There's nobody driving that mother.
Pumps in the back seat.
Okay. Slow down, let him ride right up on her ass.
There was nobody driving.
And just in case you weren't sure, they both have to say that no one's driving the hearse. They end up taking out the hearse. It crashes. They discover a dwarf inside that happens to be their old friend Tommy. And then here's where things kind of get a little bit confusing, even for me, having seen it multiple times. But I guess I find it more confusing when I'm trying to relay the story. We end up back at the house. We've got this little speech from Reggie.
Hey, you boys back yet?
You almost gave me a coronary, but I just can't figure out why they're taking these bodies and pushing them down to half size.
Pressure. What about Mom and Dad? They're up there too.
Yeah, just forget about them.
Okay. I see it all now. What we gotta do is we gotta snag that tall dude and stomp the shit out of him, and we'll find out what the hell is going on up there. Yeah, we'll lay that sucker out flat and drive a stake right through his goddamn heart.
You gotta be shitting me, man. That mother's strong.
Hey, hold on. First thing is I want Mike out of here. Reg, you take him over to Sally's, the antique store.
I had to include that little jump scare at the beginning with Reggie and Myrtle the maid, who is one of the numerous female characters who is seen only briefly in the movie and then disappears. I don't know if Myrtle is in any of the deleted scenes that I haven't seen, but that is it for her. There is no other indication that they have a maid. She's never seen again. Mike's friend, the fortune teller's granddaughter, I don't know if she has a name. I think it's just Mike's friend or girl or something in the credits. She goes to Morningside shortly after Mike leaves the fortune teller, and she's taking flowers there. She stumbles upon the door that we later find out has the canisters full of dwarves, and we hear her scream, and that's it. Jody's girlfriend, Susan, is seen in deleted scenes, and then Sally is either her sister or her friend, and that is where they take Mike. I'm kind of bringing it back around to that last clip I played. Mike is at the antique store. He sees the picture of the tall man from olden times driving a horse-drawn carriage, and the image moves, which is a fun little special effects scene, but it implies that he has been around for quite some time. Now, I think in the sequels, it's implied actually that he moves around from place to place and kind of, basically destroys these cities. So, and at this point, it's kind of best that I stop retelling this story because I do get confused in relaying the plot, especially towards the end, because it does get very jumpy. We go from place to place. We lose people. Reggie is carting off Tommy's body. They crash. Mike insists that the girls take him back home. They stumble upon the truck, and then they get attacked by a dwarf. Mike escapes. The car drives off, etc., etc. At some point, though, and I do want to discuss this scene because it's one of those quote unquote childlike scenes that works for me, and that is when Jody locks Mike up in his bedroom. And I think we're already past this scene as far as my discussion goes, but it's fun in a number of ways because it kind of defies logic in a sense, and then it's just a neat little kind of kid thing to do. But at some point, Jody locks Mike up in his room and uses a screwdriver in the door jamb to keep him from getting out. Now, the door opens inward, as most bedroom doors do, so I fail to see how that would work. But anyway, what it leads to is Mike constructing this explosive device out of a hammer, a thumbtack, a shotgun shell, and some tape. And this was something that as a kid, I could just see myself coming up with. Not the actual device, but writing that into a story. You know, I kind of was a Stephen King copycat at that time. And anytime there was an assignment in English class, you know, I'd basically write a ripoff of the last Stephen King book I had read. I do want to point out, though, that one of those Stephen King ripoffs won me first place in, I think, freshman year writing contest at school, and I was ripping off The Talisman, and I still have that story laying around the house somewhere. Got $100, so I guess you could do worse than ripping off Stephen King. But this was really, you know, this was right up my alley, and he takes that, hits the door with it, and it creates a hole that he can reach through and pull the screwdriver out and escape. But yeah, I don't want to get too much into the plot other than to say they all converge on the cemetery. They re-find Reggie, who says,
"Hey man, I don't know. I've been hiding in a casket playing like a stiff. But I did find the girls. I found Sally and Sue and a couple other girls that I never even saw before."
Were they dead?
No. I snuck them out of a window and they took off through the bushes like scared rabbits. All right.
They enter the room with all of the canisters. This is a great image. This whole scene, that room, those black canisters, the two poles, the world that Mike discovers when he falls through those two poles. And that's a great little old-timey special effect there, you know, using mirrors where he puts his hand in there and then he falls through. But I have always loved that real brief glimpse of the red planet or red world where supposedly the tall man comes from. There's a scene, I think, in the movie The Visitor that is similar with a rocky landscape like that and a red sky or something. I feel like I've seen it in another movie. It's great. That's great old, you know, green screen special effects. It's got this long line of dwarves toting those barrels through the world with other dwarves inside of them. And then Mike kind of floating above, wind blowing on him. They pull him back out and he's smoking because it's such a hot planet. This is where we get
Slaves. They're using them for slaves. The dwarves. And they gotta crush them because of the gravity and the heat. And this is the door to their planet.
So Mike has magically figured out everything by his 3-second glance into the other world. And this is, again, another strong example of that childlike storytelling. It's as if we have been sitting here the whole time being told the movie by Mike. Not just that it's from his point of view or that it's, you know, got that feel, but it really is. It's him telling us the movie. So here we have the callback to the tuning fork when Reggie places both his hands on the poles that lead to the other world, and it creates a storm outside and kind of inside too. The room that he's in, the world starts sucking in everything in that room. Reggie escapes that. Everybody is split up at this point, and we lose Reggie to the lady in lavender. And Mike and Jody kind of unceremoniously just leave him there. I think Jody says something to the effect of, there's nothing we can do for him now. So they hatch their final plan to trap the tall man. It involves a mine shaft that's just, out there, uncovered.
Boy.
You play a good game, boy, but the game is finished. Now you die.
Fear. Don't fear.
Their plan works. The tall man is trapped. And we get our wonderful surprise ending that it's all been a dream. Reggie is not dead. He is still alive. Jody is dead. And all of this stuff with the tall man has been a dream based on the overwhelming, horror of losing his parents and his brother. So he has kind of fantasized about the mysterious tall man at the cemetery that he's seen, and he's doing all these horrible things in town. So here's where we have another example of people having a problem with the film. I can understand that because I've never been a big fan of the "it's all a dream." We have this in all kinds of movies. We had it in TV shows with St. Elsewhere, where it was all in the mind of an autistic child for 10 seasons or something crazy like that. I Shot JR ended up being a whole dream thing. And I can't even think of the numerous movies right now that it's been done in. But there is an interesting foreshadowing of this at the beginning of the movie. So I want to play that little clip right now.
Let's roll the footage.
It was a good idea not to let your little brother come to the funeral and see Tommy like this.
Yeah, after Mom and Dad's funeral, he had nightmares for weeks.
Upon re-watching this for the podcast, that is the first time that I had noticed that this scene was ADR'd. Mike and... I did it. Jody and Reggie are not shown speaking their lines. It's cutaways to the funeral, to the casket. So this was an addition, a late addition, I think, after they chose the ending that they wanted to use. Coscarelli has admitted that they shot multiple endings. And so I think when they decided on the dream, it's all a dream ending, they needed to lay a foundation for that earlier. And so we get the notion of nightmares, that the tall man is a figment of his imagination, or at least his abilities are. That informs the rest of the movie. It's a nice little addition. Like I said, I never noticed it before. I was really trying to pay attention this time while I was taking notes for the film, so I guess good thing that I did. But that brings us to the end of the film, and the end of the film, actually, here's where we again have a reshoot or a later insertion, because the tall man's hair is shorter, and I think Mike looks a tad bit older here. And so it's all a dream. Go get your stuff. Mike, we're going to go take a trip somewhere. And he goes up, he gets something out of his closet, closes the closet door, and there's the tall man in the mirror. And then those quote-unquote never dead arms come crashing through the mirror and pull him into the nether region. It's kind of a dual cop-out ending. Is it a dream or is it not a dream? Because if it's a dream, then this wouldn't be happening. Or he's still dreaming and he's really messed up, which is kind of what we lead into with the sequel. And just real briefly on the sequels, I mentioned part 2, and I've seen all of them. There are interesting parts in all of them. Coscarelli has a definite, noticeable style. I have to kind of admit here that Phantasm is the only movie of his that I really enjoy. I've seen all the sequels. I've seen the first, third of The Beastmaster, and I need to give that one another shot. The version I watched did not look very good. It looked like it was zoomed in, and I think that's how the movie was made, actually. There was something about the print. It got blown up or something, so it looks kind of weird. But I'll mention The Beastmaster again in the next episode on Tourist Trap in reference to the actress that's in both of those. But I have seen Bubba Hotep, which a lot of people really like. And I have seen, John Dies at the End, which, again, a lot of people like. I have not enjoyed any of those nearly as much as the original Phantasm. I can't even remember anything about Bubba Hotep. John Dies at the End, I watched with my friend Ronnie, and we were both kind of meh. There are some Phantasm-esque touches in that, which I appreciated. I kind of thought, I kept reading about it and hearing about it, and it's always a movie that gets brought up in blogs and podcasts and stuff. So I gave it another shot a few months ago and still did not like it. And I think that has more to do with that kind of breaking the fourth wall and it's just something that doesn't work for me all that much. So that's my history with Coscarelli. Now, the actors from the movies, other than the sequels, I don't recall seeing any of them in anything else other than Angus Scrimm being on Alias, which my wife watched, which meant I kind of watched it too. And I remember thinking, oh, that's the dude from Phantasm.
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, that didn't sound right to me either. I know Scrimm from Chopping Mall and a couple of early exploitation films, or his early exploitation films, Sweet Kill and Scream Bloody Murder. And then, as I just reminded myself, he was in John Dies at the End, which shows you how memorable that was for me. The other guys have been in stuff. It's just, I think it's a lot of low-budget horror that I haven't stumbled upon. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was the score, which I just absolutely love. I have the clip at the beginning. It kind of reminds me, it makes me think of a cross between the Halloween theme and Tubular Bells, that's used in The Exorcist and other movies. And I don't know, maybe I'll play out with another portion of that soundtrack, but I love the score. I love that tubular noise that's happening in there. Phantasm, one of my favorite movies of all time. I still like it. I enjoyed watching it for the podcast. Own it. I'll watch it multiple times throughout the rest of my life, I'm sure. It gets a recommendation from me, which is just inherent in the fact that I'm doing a podcast on it. So I guess it's time to wrap it up. Thank you for sticking with me for so long. I know these get long. I go off on tons of tangents, which I'm doing right now by saying that.
It's time for another tangent.
Let's enjoy a little bit more of the score from Phantasm here at the close. And thanks for listening. Tourist Trap will be the next full episode, but I'll probably have some little mini episodes in between now and then. So stay tuned. iTunes, the blog, the Facebook, all that stuff is on my blog, so find it there. Thanks for listening. Bye.